Welcome to Grace Fellowship Baptist Church Wednesday evening Bible study for Wednesday, November 26th, 2025. Before I get started, and we are in the book of 2nd Chronicles, I want to congratulate the church on the good job with Operation Christmas Child box packing that we did Wednesday. I gave that hour up so we could pack the Operation Christmas Child boxes. This year we doubled to 100 boxes, and I am pleased to say that it went smoothly, efficiently. I was 20 minutes late getting off work, got to the church, picked up litter, came in about 10 minutes after I would normally start teaching the Bible study, and picked up the one box that was on the table and filled it, and then discovered I picked up the 100th box and filled it. I did one box. Y'all had done 99 boxes while I did the things I had to do before I got there. So, congratulations. We succeeded in doing that. They were turned in. They are on the way to present the witness of Jesus Christ elsewhere in the world. I appreciate y'all's dedication to the task. We are in the book of 2nd Chronicles. We're in chapter 24. Let's start in verse 1. Joash was 7 years old when he became king, and he reigned in Jerusalem 40 years. His mother's name was Zibiah. She was from Beersheba. I'm not reading well tonight. Joash did what was right in the eyes of the Lord all the years of Jehoiada the priest. Jehoiada chose 2 wives for him, and he had sons and daughters. So, Joash being 7 when he starts reigning, and having not seen any of the arms of government, he is very dependent upon the man that effectively raised him, the high priest Jehoiada. And he reigns for 40 years. As long as Jehoiada was alive and influencing him, he was a good king and did things reasonably well. We're going to learn tonight about what he didn't do well and what else was going on around him and why the people thought he was such a good king. Of course, the country had just come through his grandmother being regent for 6 years and importing all kinds of outside influences, bad religion, not even corrupting Yahweh worship. However, they corrupted the temple. We'll find out here in a little while, as well as neglecting it. But they brought in other gods, and Athaliah, his grandmother, brought in other gods and worshipped them and imported them, and was a terrible regent. And because of that, the countryside was looking for a king. And because he, under the influence of Jehoiada, at least publicly followed the Mosaic law, he was a much more excellent king than what they'd seen for the 3 previous monarchs. And most people at that point in time would not have remembered Jehoshaphat, the last good king. and his righteousness and how things were under him. So he's a bright spot just because it's been so dark. But things on the surface look fairly well. He tried to do what was right. He got married. He had sons and daughters. Things look right. The country feels like it's running correctly. And for most of his reign, when the high priest is in charge, things look like they're going well. Verse 4. Sometime later, Joash decided to restore the temple of the Lord. He called together the priests and Levites and said to them, "Go to the towns of Judah and collect the money due annually from all Israel to repair the temple of your God. Do it now." But the Levites did not act at once. Therefore the king summoned Jehoiada the chief priest and said to him, "Why haven't you required the Levites to bring in from Judah and Jerusalem the tax imposed by Moses, the servant of the Lord, and by the assembly of Israel for the tent of the testimony?" So here Joash told the Levites, who he did not have any right to command, to go collect the annual tax that the law of Moses said for the upkeep of the tabernacle. That would have been an appropriate tax for him to collect. Now, 2 Kings chapter 12 gives the parallel story, and there they said that Jehoiada the priest attempted to collect the census tax to repair the temple, and it was to be collected anytime a census was to be taken of the world, of the country, and he had ordered that to be done. If so, Jehoiada ordered the wrong tax to be collected, but 2 Kings also says the priest used that money for their own purposes, that the priests were corrupt and didn't repair the temple. They said they were repairing the temple, but they absconded with the money and didn't repair the temple. And that when Joash saw the temple wasn't being repaired and the people said they were paying their taxes, he held an accounting. Here he orders, and apparently 2 Chronicles is mainly taking from the royal records, not the records that were made by the prophets that were writing Kings. At least some of the time Kings were written by priests, some of the time they were written by prophets, and it's very clear, since they're pointing out that the priests were corrupt, this was not the priest writing Kings, but a prophet who could call the priest up short also. Or if it was in the priesthood, they were honest priests that were seeing the other priests be dishonest. But the royal record indicates that Joash had studied scripture and was asking the right tax to be collected. The priests, on the other hand, collected the wrong tax for the wrong reason. And this indicates several problems. The priesthood itself has become corrupted. They are not serious about worshiping Yahweh. Jehoiada is, and we're going to learn he's old enough that he probably remembered, may have been an adult under Jehoshaphat. And he may have even already retired from being high priest under Jehoshaphat. Now, he was to serve until he died, basically. So he was still being high priest. Verse 6. Therefore the king summoned Jehoiada the chief priest and said to him, why haven't you required the Levites to bring in from Judah and Jerusalem the tax imposed by Moses, the servant of the Lord, and by the assembly of Israel for the tent of testimony? So he's asking Jehoiada for an accounting. Why haven't you brought the tax in? Why haven't you repaired the temple? I want the temple repaired. And he's not paying for it out of the royal treasury. He's asking the people to contribute, the people to be taxed. Thing was, if he did say the census tax, which was also specifically for repairing the tabernacle, it was to only be taken when the people were counted. And it was to be their offering so disease, pestilence, death would not break out on the people. If that's what Joash is collecting, he is taking a census of the people every year. In one sense, if he's using that information correctly, no problem with that. But it's not, Kings doesn't indicate that the people were being counted. Chronicles doesn't indicate they were being counted. And Kings indicates that the census tax was the one collected. Here it indicates that the collection once a year to keep the tabernacle repaired was what was to be collected. It's a much smaller tax. It would the other one was essentially a quarter ounce of gold per person across the country every time the census was taken. This was about a tenth of an ounce of gold or silver, depending upon whether you're wealthy or poor, collected once a year. Now, if you take a census once in a lifetime, collecting a little bit every year actually collects more. If they were collecting the larger amount every year, they should have had plenty of money to have it repaired. Even if they were collecting the smaller amount, they should have at least been able to buy building materials, and they should have been, accumulating at the temple site, or workmen should have been doing some sort of work. Now, at this point in time, the priest could have argued only priests and Levites could be in the temple, and so, we're doing it and we're collecting, we're doing the repairs, we're buying the materials, we're doing the repairs ourselves, but, we're also being priests, and so we don't have a lot of time, but Joash doesn't accept that kind of excuse. He's not seeing the temple repaired. You shouldn't be paid if you're not repairing the temple. Pretty simple, straightforward. He's wanting to see the temple repaired. Verse 7, now the sons of that wicked woman Athaliah had broken into the temple of God and had used even the sacred objects for the Baals. So here is injected why they were needing to repair the temple. Athaliah had sons that were so wicked they broke into the temple, did vandalism, and then absconded with the sacred objects to go worship the Baals. Thing is, both Chronicles and Kings indicate that she killed all of her own sons and that she was importing princes from Israel to help her reign. And it's those people who were causing the problems. Now, the thing is, apparently she had other sons during her 6-year reign from these same people who were her brothers, half-brothers, cousins, etc. So she may have, and the royal record called them sons because in Hebrew it just means a male relative that's younger than you. And it not necessarily the son that we think of in English, where you're the biological child. Apparently, Athaliah had no biological children. So these were her younger relatives that broke into the temple. And they desecrated it, they did vandalism, they stole, and all that needed to be repaired. It's implied both here and in Kings that the priest may have been making the objects to use in the temple worship that had been stolen from that money. But it's also flatly stated in Kings that they were using it for their personal use. So they were not using it appropriately. It was designated to repair the building, not all the utensils of the building. Verse 8, at the king's command, a chest was made and placed outside at the gate of the temple of the Lord. A proclamation was then issued in Judah and Jerusalem that they should bring to the Lord the tax that Moses, the servant of God, had required of Israel in the desert. All the officials and all the people brought their contributions gladly, dropping them in the chest until it was full. Whenever the chest was brought in by the Levites to the king's officials, and they saw that there was a large amount of money, the royal secretary and the officer of the chief priest would come and empty the chest and carry it back to its place. They did this regularly and collected a great amount of money. The king and Jehoiada gave it to the men who carried out the work required for the temple of the Lord. They hired masons and carpenters to restore the Lord's temple, and also workers in iron and bronze to repair the temple. So 2 Chronicles indicates that Joash made a proclamation and they put a chest with a hole in it, and the people brought their required tax and donated it as they came to the temple. In 2 Kings, it indicates that Jehoiada, to placate the king, had the idea of bringing a chest and drilling a hole in the top and having money offered to God as an offering to be put in the temple as a temple treasury in that box as they came to the temple. And the people were quite willing to pay to have the temple repaired and would bring in money. And when the temple guards saw that the chest was getting full, then they would call the royal secretary, and the royal secretary and Jehoiada would take the chest in to the royal counting office, and they would open it and count it and put it in bags, and the chest would be taken back. Now, I think we can put those two together fairly simply. Jehoiada understood he upset the king by not repairing the temple. He decided, instead of going collecting the money myself, I'm going to have a chest here, and the people can contribute to the fund to repair the temple. And the people wanted to repair the temple and brought offerings in. The king thought he had declared that the people needed to bring in regular offerings that were to be made, and he misunderstood the Mosaic command that he was interpreting it that they should be essentially being taxed every year for the upkeep of the temple. And the people knew they weren't being counted as a census, and that was for an offering for them to be. And so those who worshiped Yahweh and wanted to see the temple repaired were bringing offerings in, and they were happy to do that. And a large amount of money was being collected, and the people were coming and making offerings, and regularly enough money was being collected that the work started and was continuous without interruption until it was finished. So I think what we have here is Jehoiada came up with the idea of the chest. Joash said, yes, let's do that. He made a command. He misunderstood the Mosaic law and commanded that everybody bring money to the temple. Jehoiada understood that was not the right way to tax the people, and says, bring your offering. If you want to bring some, here is the place to put it in the chest. If you don't, just come bring your offering. And he didn't require it of people, but people wanted to see the temple repaired enough. They brought money in, and they wanted to see Joash happy with the temple and see it repaired. And they brought it in, and God put on the people's hearts, the average people, to bring in enough money. And the people continually coming to the temple brought in enough money to get the temple repaired in a reasonable length of time, and the work continued continuously until it happened. Before that, it had been embezzled by the priest. After that, because both priest and royal secretary counted the money, it was accounted for correctly. Let's look at verse 13. The men in charge of the work were diligent, and the repairs progressed under them. They rebuilt the temple of God according to its original design and reinforced it. When they had finished, they brought the rest of the money to the king and Jehoiada, and with it were made articles for the Lord's temple, articles for the service from the burnt offerings, and also dishes and other objects of gold and silver. As long as Jehoiada lived, burnt offerings were presented continually in the temple of the Lord. So in 2 Chronicles, it says that after they repaired it, they then brought the rest of the money in, and then they made utensils so that worship could go on in the temple. And eventually the temple got the utensils that had been stolen by Athaliel's relatives. In 2 Kings chapter 12, the equivalent passage says that the workmen were honest and did not need any accounting, because they were doing it as if they were doing it unto God, and therefore they didn't have to be held accountable, that they were paid and they paid their workmen and everybody was honest. Apparently, the writers of Kings were more involved in the process than they let on to, or at least were familiar with it. The workmen that got hired, and these were hirelings that were already masons, already carpenters, already metal workers, and they were therefore not priests or Levites, came in and did the work in the temple where only Levites should be. But God wanted the temple repaired, so he let those who were honest and doing the work do the work without any retribution against them. He also forgave Joash for asking for the wrong tax and blessed Jehoiada, who told the people, this is an offering, this isn't a tax. Contribute what you want. And they brought in more than enough, and the work got done. So it took both priest and king encouraging each other to be honest and dependable, and encouraging the people to be caring and honest to get the work done. And it was not the Levites who should have been doing the work that did it. It's very clear in both accounts that these were common workers that were already used to doing masonry, already used to doing, carpentry and metalworking, that did it. But God blessed their efforts and they got it done, and they were honest about it, so there was no need to audit them and double check things. Here it just said they were diligent and they did it quickly, and they completed the work. And then when they finished, they took the leftovers that were still coming in, and then they made the articles, the bowls and plates and the shovels and the forks and everything else it takes to do the work that were supposed to be there with the extras. In Kings, it implies that the priests were making those and not repairing the temple. It also implies that they were embezzling those things and embezzling the money. And so, we don't totally understand. And apparently there was not a public accounting, and the articles did not show up until after the repairs were done, and may have only been made with the extra money that was brought in after the repairs were done at the temple. And the first offerings that were taken by the Levites and priests were absorbed by dishonest priests and Levites. I can believe that. I can believe that the priests had become corrupted and were looking for their own wealth and not God's honor. Jehoiada was the honest and upright priest who made it work, and as long as he was around, there was a good influence. And as long as he was around, morning and evening sacrifices were done in the temple. Verse 15. Now Jehoiada was old and full of years, and he died at the age of 130. He was buried with the kings in the city of David because of the good he had done for Israel, for God, and for his temple. And so Jehoiada was recognized by Joash, and the people as being worthy of honor. And so he was buried, and the language in the Hebrew indicates with King David and Solomon and those in that tomb, not the secondary tomb that the evil kings had set up for themselves and the people stuck their bodies in and wouldn't let them have the honor of being buried with kings. But he was put back into the royal tomb as a sign of honor that he had done things for Israel, the kingdom, for God, and for the temple, and that he had been an honest man and done things well. In 2 Kings, it said he was buried with the kings in the city of David, again implying that it is the royal tomb. The language is not as precise as it was here, but this is probably from the royal record, and it was ordered by Joash that he be buried with the kings, not where the priest would be buried. Verse 17, after the death of Jehoiada, the officials of Judah came and paid homage to the king, and he listened to them. They abandoned the temple of the Lord, the God of their fathers, and worshipped Asherah poles and idols. Because of their guilt, God's anger came upon Judah and Jerusalem. Although the Lord sent prophets to the people to bring them back to him, and though they testified against them, they would not listen. Then the Spirit of God came upon Zechariah, the son of Jehoiada, the priest. He stood before the people and said, "This is what God says. Why do you disobey the Lord's commands? You will not prosper because you have forsaken the Lord. He has forsaken you." But they plotted against him, and by order of the king, they stoned him to death in the courtyard of the Lord's temple. King Joash did not remember the kindness of Zechariah's father Jehoiada had shown him, but killed his son, who said as he lay dying, "May the Lord see this and call you to account." So corrupt officials came and petitioned the king after Jehoiada died and basically asked, "Hey, let's go worship all these other gods. It's more fun." And the Asherah poles were erotic objects. And so worshiping them was basically worshiping sexual expression. And I can see that being more fun than, having to fast once a month and bring a tenth of all your offerings to the Lord and go worship 4 times a year at the temple and, eat unleavened bread and boiled meat and all the things that Yahweh worship was. And Zechariah, Jehoiada's son, as a prophet, stood up and rebuked the people. And in 2 Kings, it said that King Joash was the one that caused the conspiracy to have him killed. Here, it said the people were stirred up and Joash ordered it. I think both of them are speaking truth from 2 different directions, just like we talked about the chest. Each of them are speaking truth from 2 different directions. Jehoiada the priest said, "Hey, let's put a chest." The king orders it. People do it. Here, I think the people were stirred up and wanted to see Zechariah dead. Joash went along with that, ordered it done, but they stoned him in the temple. Now, Jesus indicated that he was killed in the temple with a weapon instead of being stoned. And that he died between the entrance and the altar. That is a terrible place to stone somebody. But as a prophet, God kept him alive long enough after the stoning to utter the curse that God had put on the people because they did that. And because Joash went along with the people or encouraged the people, he was also part of what was directed there. And Zechariah warned them that if you abandon God, God will abandon you, and he did. And then as he was dying, he said, may God call you to account. Verse 23, at the turn of the year, the army of Aram marched against Joash. It invaded Judah and Jerusalem and killed all the leaders of the people. They sent all the plunder to their king in Damascus. Although the Aramean army had come in with only a few men, the Lord delivered in their hands a much larger army. Because Judah had forsaken the Lord, the God of their fathers, judgment was executed on Joash. When the Arameans withdrew, they left Joash severely wounded. His officials conspired against him for murdering the son of Jehoiada the priest, and they killed him in his bed. So he died and was buried in the city of David, but not in the tombs of the kings. So he was buried in the royal area but not in the tombs of the kings. So Jehoiada, the high priest, who was righteous, got buried in the tomb of the kings. But Joash, who started out as a righteous king under Jehoiada, did not get buried in the tomb of the kings. And apparently he didn't get buried in the tomb of the evil kings. They just generated a new tomb for him. Kind of sad. He started out so well, and he ruled a really long time. 40 years as king is a long time. Now that put him 47 when he died, slightly older than the average life expectancy, not exceedingly long, but that was a good, healthy life. They would have viewed that as being blessed of God, that he lived slightly longer than average. This indicates that Aram just invaded on their own. 2 Kings tells a different story there. It says that Aram attacked Gath and conquered it and was on the way back home when they attacked Jerusalem and killed Joash. Well, they destroyed the army, and then his officials conspired to kill him. Let's start here at verse 26. Those who conspired against him were Zebad, the son of Shemaiah, an Ammonite woman, and Jehozabad, the son of Shimrith, a Moabite woman. In 2 Kings, these are the two men identified, and it gives these two same names, but it implies that they're their fathers. Here it gives that these were the wives of Israelites, but they were foreigners. So this tells us something about how corrupt the country had become. They're intermarrying with the Ammonites and Moabites, which they were not supposed to do. And these two officials of Joash, they were his court officials, some of his court officials. They were half-breeds, and their mothers had influenced them in the ways of Aram and Moab and not of the ways of the Lord. And so they killed a king when he was wounded on his own bed. They killed him in the palace, is the implication. Verse 27. The account of his sons and the many prophecies about him and the record of the restoration of the temple of God are written in the annotations of the book of the kings. And Amaziah, his son, succeeded him as king. In 2 Kings, it gives more detail about where he was killed. Here it implies that he was killed in the palace. There, in 2 Kings, it doesn't say he was wounded, but that he was killed outside the city and then brought in and buried, and his son ruled in his place. Excuse me. As long as Joash was influenced by the godly man that raised him and that kept Yahweh worship going, despite all the corruption going on around him in the country and etc., things went well. There was peace. They could be prosperous enough. They rebuilt the temple. They remade the vessels for the temple. But after Jehoiada died, politics shifted, and Joash was influenced by these other people, and it caused his death by a small military force that had just conquered another country that was very warlike and had a large army and had won, but not many people left afterwards. And they were basically on the way home, and they took a shortcut through Judah. And as they did so, they attacked the Judean army and won. They were battle weary. They should not have won. They were smaller in number, and God gave Judah to them because Judah had become corrupt. They were no longer worshiping Yahweh. And even Joash as king and Jehoiada as priest could not bring the hearts of the people back to Yahweh. And so Athaliel's influence is still going on in the country. And as soon as Jehoiada dies, it all starts falling apart again. And Joash falls to that temptation. And he conspires to kill Jehoiada's son, Zechariah. And this is the same Zechariah that Jesus mentions as all the prophets are killed in Jerusalem. From righteous Abel to righteous Zechariah. This is that Zechariah. Holy Father, Have us to be like Jehoiada, the righteous priest, keeping unrighteous people in line, including the king, who was really not righteous at heart like David had been, but was just following what seemed to be popular. But even at that, Joash was there by your command, and he made things better and physically caused the temple to be repaired. And you blessed the workmen that they did it and did it back to what it had been under Solomon, and even strengthened it and repaired it and made it better, because they'd learned in the ensuing hundreds of years better building techniques. And so they made the improvements they knew they could make. Have us to be the people that bring the offering into the chest and bring that free will offering and keep stuffing the chest, that your kingdom work will be done. Lord, have us to be the honest workmen that go about our daily lives working for you, doing whatever it is we do, whether it's water system work or, retail sales or work in schools or all the various professions that we as a church have within us. Have us to be honest and good and faithful workmen, that we would work as if we were working for you. Have us to have the integrity that comes from both the priestly and the royal accounting, making sure that things go well, that nobody would find fault with our workmanship and how we use our funds. But Lord, have us to not be fickle like Joash was, that when your prophets call us short for our own shortcomings, we would hear what you're telling us and repent and soften our hearts and worship you. That we would be the people that you described to Solomon earlier in this book, that we would humble ourselves and pray and seek your face and turn from our wicked way, not go our own wicked way, like Joash did late in his life. That he was more like his grandfather and great-grandfather. But Lord, have us to be faithful and righteous people our whole lives. In your almighty and holy name, amen. I am your host, Frank Reich, Associate Pastor of Family Ministry at Grace Fellowship Baptist Church. And this has been the Wednesday evening Bible study for Wednesday, November 26th, 2025. Yes, and that is the day before Thanksgiving. We will meet. This is recorded on Saturday, November 22nd, 2025. And we came to the church this morning and decorated for Christmas, and it is now festive. And it went a little slower than in years past. Frankie and I were delayed. We had some things to do, and we showed up about the time it normally gets finished. It was mainly done. There were still things to do. And but people were there, they were diligent, they were doing it, and it did not take us long to get finished. It's always a lot of fun. It's always a lot of fun to decorate with people and visit with people and see people willingly and happily doing what needs to be done around the church. I hope to see you tomorrow at church. I hope to see you Wednesday at the Bible study. I hope you celebrate and thank God for the good that's in your life this coming Thursday, that you would worship around the dinner table with family and friends, and that you would be grateful to God because He has blessed you, even if sometimes it doesn't feel like it's a blessing. You live in one of the most economically prosperous countries of all time, and you have a lot of really cool, useful things that nobody in world history has ever had. And you have abundance of food, good clothes, good homes. You have convenient transportation. You don't have to walk everywhere. You don't have to have an animal to ride somewhere. If you need light, you don't have to get two sticks and rub them together till they get hot enough to burn. You just flip a light switch on. There's all kinds of things God has given you that are great things. So I want you to be grateful. Have a blessed week.